Dibisuhkan memang.
National Seminar on Conflict and Peacebuilding, Local and Global Context in UIN Hidayatullah State Islamic University, Jakarta, 21st of June 2023. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this seminar will consist of 3 agendas. The first is opening, the second is speakers' presentations, and the third is closing. Now, let's begin our seminar by reciting Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Moving on to the next agenda, there will be an opening mark from Professor Hidayatullah as the Dean of FISIP UIN Jakarta. For Professor Dr. Hidayatullah, the time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable Vice Dean for Academic, Dr. Effendy, and for Administration, Dr. Cucu, and for Student Affairs, Dr. Agus Muhammad, the Honorable Head of Department, Ibu Dr. Syarif, Ibu Dr. Jamilah, and Pak Budi Sugara, all lecturer, all lecturer of FISIP UIN Jakarta, and all participants. First of all, let's thank God for mercy and blessing that today we discuss a very important topic about conflict and peace building, local and global context. I would like to say thank you to all speakers. We are very lucky to have Professor Bakarr Bah from Northern Illinois University, USA, and also Professor from our neighbor from Depok, UIII, and also our beloved lecturer, Pak Professor Hasan Ansori. Welcome to Professor Bakarr Bah. We actually almost have the single name, the last name, Bah, because people call me Bah. So people call you Professor Bah, so almost single name. Welcome to FISIP. I think this is probably the first visit, but hopefully in the future you will be visit again our faculty, and also for Ibu Ella, I think this is the second visit to visit, because you already become speaker in previous Friday talk. Hasan, of course, every year you are here in visit our visit, and I think this topic about conflict and peace building is very popular issue among us studying social science subject. We already introduced this topic from in any department, from sociology, Harmonious. He introduced about conflict paradigm, and also from political science and international relations. So studies about this topic is also have very vast, and so there are so many references of high conflict and conflict resolution in for example, the scholar, there will be so many references about conflict and conflict resolution. And probably I would like to share about what the most recent I read about the importance of trust. The importance of trust for conflict resolution, because some authors say that no conflict resolution, there are no conflict resolution without trust. So it's depend on if the community involved in conflict and violence, and when they still use their own perspective, subjective perspective of this community, so the conflict will never progress into conflict resolution. They will still be in war, not only cold war, but probably hot war, yeah. Because if then the conflict will progress into peace situation if community and member of community can open their mind into other group interpretation. I mean, when they only use their, when they also understand about other group interpretation about what issue bring them into conflict, probably the conflict will progress into peace. It can be called peace or warm peace. So I think this also the situation in Indonesia, for example, or in Ukraine or in other countries, when the trust between people in conflict still the distrust is so high, and then the level of distrust probably like 80 to 90%. So I believe that the conflict resolution will not achieve the goal for the peace. So I believe that here from this seminar we hope that some perspective, probably the speaker will contribute how to solve, or at least some situation in Indonesia we have as a multicultural country. We also live sometimes it's like the recursive model. Yeah. We live in peace, but sometimes we have conflicts such as in Ambon, in Aceh, in many countries. And later, Bu Elati will present about how women, not only in Indonesia but in other countries, how women participate in conflict resolution. And Pak Hasan will present about the situation in Indonesia in general, and Prof. Bakarr will give us about the situation in Ukraine. And I hope we enjoy this seminar, and we will have we can take benefit from this event. So for the to close my speech, I think I will read a poem in Indonesia. Buah mangga berwarna-warna dan buah durian. Peserta dan panitia semua, Anda memang keren. Pak Hasan to translate. Sorry, you don't understand, so just ask Pak Hasan to translate. I think that's all from my speech, and thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much for your opening speech, Professor Dr. Hidayatullah. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to the next agenda, that is speakers' presentation and discussions. Before that, I would like to invite Ibu Riana Marhila, the lecturer of FISIP UIN Jakarta, as the moderator for this seminar to lead the program. And I would like to invite all the speakers and Ibu Riana to come to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please give welcoming applause to all our speakers and moderators.
Professor Bakarr Bah, Dr. Effendy, and Dr. Mohammad Hasan Ansori. Welcome our speakers to FISIP UIN Jakarta. Not so much room for Hasan, but anyway, welcome. The Honorable Dean of FISIP UIN Jakarta, Professor Hidayatullah, MA, our Vice Dean, Dr. Dr. Cucu, and Dr. Ansori. Also our head of departments from politics, international relations, from Sudara, and also from sociology, Jamila. Ladies and gentlemen, here at the Auditorium, Professor Dr. Bahtiar Effendy, and also participants online via YouTube and Zoom. Good morning and welcome to today's seminar about conflict and peace building, local and global context. We are going to discuss specifically on Ukraine war, post-conflict, and Ukraine war and the possibility of a multipolar peace, post-conflict democracy and peace building in Indonesia and also in the region, and the roles of women in conflict and peace building, both in Indonesia and in global context. The presentation will be held for around an hour, and there will be Q&A session at the end of the speaker's presentation. So we encourage you to hold on to your questions and ask Department of Sociology, Northern Illinois University. He is also the editor-in-chief of African Conflict and Peace Building Review, Indiana University Press. He is also the American editor of Critical Sociology, the Association for Critical Sociology and Sage Publishing. He earned his PhD and master degree with honors in sociology from New School for Social Research, New York, United States of America, and he also earned his diploma of higher education, which equals to Master of Arts from University of Sofia, Bulgaria. Today, he is going to speak about the Ukraine war and strategic shifts in international relations, the possibilities of a multipolar peace, and the allocated time is 25 minutes, and therefore, Professor Bah, the time is now yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much. It's actually very wonderful to be here in Indonesia. I feel at home already. As I tell my friend, Indonesia is African America at the same time for me. I'm going to talk about the Ukraine war from an international security and geopolitical standpoint. What I'm going to be saying is not necessarily my personal views about what I want to happen or the way I think is right or wrong, but mostly just going to be an analysis as I see things as somebody who works in peace and conflict and international security. And the way I get into the Ukraine discussion is about right when the war started, I received several calls from US TV stations asking me to make some comments about the Ukraine war. So I did, whether you talk of US-Iran relations. The first thing I told them was, this is a proxy war. And now, the context of this proxy war is tied to the Cold War. We all know what happened. The Soviets, the United States, the Soviets lost the battle. Two kinds of the US and its Western allies is involved in two conflicts. One with Russia, the other one with China. so forth. But normally those are still kind of within, I guess what you can say, the silence of the concept of sovereignty. Two concepts are very useful to understanding the limits of sovereignty, so to speak, that emerged recently through civil wars. One is actually the idea of the R2P, the responsibility to protect. And this is as opposed to the state. Okay? But that's a very important point to understand about how encroachment into what is called sovereignty through the R2P. The other one, of course, is the concept of collective security, meaning that when you form a NATO, when you form a Warsaw Pact alliances, when one country gets attacked, then others kind of get involved in it. So these are like, so what the Ukraine war actually did here is actually, it transformed the way we understood sovereignty. Because before the Ukraine war, sovereignty meant that nobody is going to take another country's territory. If you're arguing about it, that's fine. You can invade like you just did to Iraq, but you'll come out. Now with the Ukraine war, Russia said part of Ukraine is their land, and they are taking it. They took Crimea, and they took part of the Donbas region. We shall see whether they will hold on to it or not. But this is a fundamental shift in the way we understand international relations. That is to say, you can take land from another sovereign country. Okay? So we'll see how that plays out, but I think this is the one shift that I meant to say. The second shift is what I call the gravitation towards NATO. Now, we all know the history of NATO, the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact ended, but before the Ukraine war, NATO was actually in some kind of like problems, primarily because the United States was seen to be spending more to support NATO, and many European countries were kind of like not too committed or to do their own share. So there were kind of internal disagreements about cost sharing and so forth. And also some countries in Europe were actually ideologically opposed to NATO. And that's why they actually didn't join. Finland, Sweden, and some others actually refused to join NATO for some time. And part of it was some, again, it's a lot of complicated things, but the point is that they wanted to keep away from the, Ukraine war, Ukraine war started, what happened? Well, Finland now has joined NATO. Sweden has applied and they will join NATO. And also other European countries are now willing to spend more money on supporting NATO. So you see what I call a gravitation towards NATO. NATO is much more stronger today than actually it was before the Ukraine war. Ironically, one of the arguments of the invasion of Ukraine was to stop the expansion of NATO. But we will see how that goes. But this is one important shift in the as a result of the Ukraine war, that is the consolidation or the emergence of a much more stronger and assertive Ukraine. Now, on the flip side, something else is happening. Remember, the international security is always a war between two elephants, two giants. Before we had the Warsaw Pact and NATO, the Soviet and the Russians. Well, as NATO is consolidating, what is also happening is that the anti-Western alliances, or the countries that have quote-unquote diplomatic relations with the West, they are also coming together. There's a consolidation of anti-Western alliances. And you see those things in the relation between China and Russia, Iran and Russia, Iran and China, and you can add some few others there. But essentially what you have in Vienna is countries that had issues or problems with the West are finding that they can actually be friends. Russia and China has actually, they have stated, their presidents have stated that they will have a no-limit cooperation. That is a law. So this is one of the shifts that is actually happening as a result of the Ukraine war. That is the consolidation of anti-Western ties. And the last thing I want to mention on this shift is the realignment of humanitarian aid. Okay, now this is actually very important because for most of the contemporary history, many parts of the world, especially in Africa, have been characterized by they have been characterized by various kinds of conflicts, and a lot of those conflicts actually involve the West in one way or the other. Either the result of colonial rule or some kind of, but essentially the West is involved. And what we have also seen that in those conflicts, the West has always been involved in providing humanitarian assistance. So humanitarian aid has always been a very important point in the management of conflicts around the world. But humanitarian aid comes from money, and money is not unlimited. And what has actually happened is that the Ukraine is receiving far much more humanitarian aid compared to any other country. So Western countries are actually realigning their interest and humanitarian efforts. So essentially what we have here is that humanitarian assistance is gravitating towards Ukraine in a way that the sufferings of the people of Ukraine kind of like has become a little much more elevated as compared to the sufferings of people in Ethiopia and other places. So these are all fundamental shifts that emerge from the Ukraine war. And let me just wrap up here with some few comments about the takeaway. You can move that. Right, okay. What is the takeaway? So I think we have to ask, what are the possibilities of the multipolar peace? Eventually there is going to be peace, but now we're going to have a multipolar situation. NATO and the anti-Western alliances. So what is that going to look like? There are some ideological frames that somehow led us to here. And again, we don't. There's not much time, but just think of liberalism, nationalism, Eurocentrism, and globalization. Okay, liberalism, nationalism, Eurocentrism, and globalization. These are the forces that somehow that has shaped these shifts. Okay? And on the one hand, you will see that the position of the West or NATO is more anchored in actually the idea of Eurocentrism and liberalism. The position of the anti-Western alliances is actually anchored mostly in some kind of understanding of globalism, a different globalism, and of course here the other question is nationalism. Russian efforts is anchored in some kind of nationalism. So you have these ideological forces that are playing, which I think, in my view, will shape the way we understand international security for some time. And this realignment leads to a simple thing, what I call the banality of oppression. And it begins with the Ukrainians. The biggest victims of the Ukraine war is the Ukrainian people. Okay? But who is fighting it is not just the Ukrainians. And I think in a multipolar world, what we learned from the Cold War, when the big giants fight, they fight in the territories of smaller countries, and some smaller countries suffer. They never fight in their own territories. They fight somewhere else. So I think as we think of what a multipolar peace will look like, we have to really think of the multiple terrains where proxy wars will keep on happening in addition to Ukraine. So I'll leave it here, and hopefully we can have some more discussions. Thank you so much. Jazakallah khairan kaseeran. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bah. I'm really sorry I have to hurry you. So moving to our second speaker, I'd like to welcome Dr. Hasan Ansori. Clearly, some of you have seen him around in FISIP. Well, he is the executive director of the Habibie Center. He's also the senior advisor of Indonesia Geothermal Center of Excellence. He is also the senior researcher at Center for the Study of Religion and Culture. And again, he is a lecturer here at FISIP UIN Jakarta in the Sociology Department. He earned his PhD and his second master degree from University of Hawaii, United States of America. His first master degree was from University of Indonesia in sociology, and he was also the alumni of UIN Hidayatullah Jakarta from the Faculty of Usuluddin in year 2000. Today he is going to talk about the post-conflict democracy and peace building in Indonesia and the region. Well, the allocated time is 25 minutes. Dr. Hasan, the time 25 minutes. Yeah, time now is yours.
Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi semua. Distinguished speakers, moderator, Honorable Dekanat FISIP UIN, Bu Iba, Pak Iding, Bu Profesor Cucu, and our colleague, friends, lecturer of the FISIP UIN, and students. It's very wonderful, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity. And it's always nice to be here, to be at home. FISIP is always my home and always at my heart. And first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the team, particularly to Bu Iba and Bu Iim for organizing this wonderful opportunity. And I believe it always takes strong commitment to organize this kind of event, and hope that this kind of event will keep going on. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, in this meeting, I would like to talk on the issue of democracy, conflict, and conflict resolution. Generally in Southeast Asia, but very especially, I'll give focus on the Indonesia. Will you share, please, a slide or PowerPoint? Thank you. Like you see on the screen, yeah. I would like to start my presentation by sharing the observation of, among other prominent scholars of conflict and conflict resolution in the world. What I would like to share the observation of the Jorek of his mapping of the global war, where he divided the global war into 4 periods: the World War I, the Second World War, Cold War, and the last but not least, what we call internal wars. Of the war against terrorism. Internal war is defined here as the war that happened between community, between group or religious or ethnic group within the internal community of a region. And I believe if John Reck continues observation right now, he probably one more add categorization, particularly by considering the current geopolitical tension between major powers. Probably they will call new Cold War. We already said it's hot war, yeah, because it already become hot. Probably because of climate change. And the observation of John Reck also was emphasized by Moynihan, is one of the prominent scholars in the United Nations. As nation state no longer seem inclined to go to war with one another, but internal groups fight all the time. So the type of internal war and terrorism are now become the dominant type. I think what happened in Ukraine, like Professor Bah already shared, is probably one of the outliers, the exception of the current trend right now of the internal conflict. Next slide, please. Conflict and violence, I think, have been one of the most crucial global agenda and recently received a deep attention from the world leaders, particularly after the Cold War. And conflict analysis as well. an observer mostly considers Southeast Asia, and specifically Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines, and the most current one in Myanmar as a country with a long history of conflict and violence in Southeast Asia. In terms of terrorism and violent extremism, they also Southeast Asia considered as a safe haven and breeding zone, breeding ground for the terrorism or violent extremism. Also in Indonesia, southern part of Thailand, and southern part of the Philippines or the Bangsamoro. Let me display the data that this is the consortium data that we try to compile all together, the data that we built from the National Violence Monitoring System, the data that was built by the Habib Center, the coordinating Ministry of Human Development and Culture, and all together with the World Bank, and the data from Deep South Watch in the Thailand, and International Alert in the Philippines. We try our best actually to also include Myanmar. We tried our best to already design a program and activity and try to work together as well with GSI, one of the most prominent GSI, civil society in Myanmar. GSI is Center for International Integrity, but it's very unfortunate we don't really have a good access to enter to the Myanmar. So we just would like to provide this data. Next slide, please. Sorry. This is what I mean the data. So, if you look at the data, we try to compare one of the hottest region in Southeast Asia, and we see here the Aceh and Papua, certain part of Thailand and the Philippines. So, very unfortunate, I could not include here the current trend of conflict in Myanmar. By sharing the two variables of the incident and the variable of that, we can see that at least a couple of points we can derive from this kind of data. First, within the period of 1999 until 2005, we can see, and it reached peak in 2021. We see the highest, a dominant of conflict in the Aceh, and it very drastically decreased after 2005, and this can be explained was the conflict in Aceh reached a Helsinki peace agreement between the Free Aceh Movement and the government of Indonesia. But many other conflict in Papua, in southern part of Thailand, in Bangsamoro, in the Philippines, they are still increasingly stable, while in Aceh is very drastically increased, and the forward is getting flattened. Next slide, please. I would like to also look at the same data, but try to see the type of violence by sharing incident in Southeast Asia. This is data from 1999 to 2014. If you look at these four regions, the hottest region in Southeast Asia, we see that the conflict in Aceh, Bangsamoro, and in Thailand, southern part of Thailand or Deep South Watch, was predominantly, by the separatism conflict. Is totally different from what happened in Papua, where the domestic violence and particularly violent drugs crime much more dominant than other type of conflict that relative to other regions in Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. The same things, this try to see the variable of that, and the previous one, we see the variable of incident. And the same thing happened, the same thing we can look at here. What happened in Papua is totally different from other three regions in South Asia, where domestic violent crime, etc., is more dominant compared to other regions, where in which separatism are more dominant than the three. Next slide, please. I would like to invite you to especially focus on the Indonesia. We try to look at types of violent conflict in Indonesia, and I try to divide into two periods, which is two critical and very distinctive period. The first period from 1999 to 2004. If we look at the first period, we see that the identity-based conflict has become more dominant than other type of conflict. Separatism, routine violence, resource violence, governance, or political violence. And by the second period, after entering or coming to 2005, the scene of the conflict in Indonesia is getting shift from identity-based to the most dominant is routine violence. Routine violence means like fighting, lynching, street fighting, demonstration. This is like a routine violence. The incidental and sporadic violence. Next slide, please. I would like to also introduce the trend of identity-based communal violence in Indonesia from 1998 to 2014. And again, this data is entry from the National Violence Monitoring Database. And we can see all together here, it reached peak in 1999 and 2000. And it can be explained by the fact that during that time, Indonesia experienced a monetary crisis where diverse conflict, appear all over Indonesia at the same time, conclusively. And after 2002 and 2003, most of the conflict either peacefully resolved or de-escalated. And that's why the reason after 2003 is, very drastically decreased. And most of the conflict after that time was resolved, except for the conflict in Aceh that was resolved in 2005 by the Helsinki Peace Agreement. But what makes interesting here is the 2012 and 13 is getting increased, and we need the investigation what happened during in 2013 and 14 why it's getting increased. Next slide, please. This issue behind identity-based conflict in Indonesia from 2005 and 2014. If we see all diverse type of this identity-based conflict in Indonesia, setting all together and combine all together variable, we can conclude one thing, that interreligious conflict are the most bloody and protracted conflict in Indonesia, and then followed by inter-ethnic conflict. Although we can see the school or university identity conflict, mostly people call tawuran pelajar, in term variable quest is the most dominant, more than 2000, but in terms of impact, injuries and death is very less compared to the interreligious and interethnic. And this making interreligious and ethnic conflict in Indonesia more bloodier and more protected. Next slide, please. Building democracy and peace in conflict area. Democratic intervention now become as the instrument, strategic instrument for conflict settlement. Memorandum, dialogue, negotiation, mediation. One example that will happen in Indonesia, although it's the bring about negative result for Indonesia, is the memorandum of the Timor-Leste. But again, I will emphasize, whatever the Timor-Leste, it is still a democratic intervention. And this is the principle of President Habibie during that time, that democracy should be the instrument of any kind of any tension of conflict. Post-conflict election or democracy as an instrument of peacefully resolving conflict. And it's important to know that post-conflict election or democracy is a creative innovation that was created by the second generation of the peacekeepers after and expand to the world possibly after the end of Cold War. The end of Cold War had brought about the victory of liberal democracy, and this make people or peacekeepers of all the world try to introduce democracy as the main instrument of resolving conflict all over the world. Post-conflict democracy has two main things and all together. First, hopefully it will become validation for peace building, but at the same time also a foundation for building democracy within the post-conflict area. So this is process of, we call it mutually constitutive or interacting process. Most studies mainly focus on how the democracy of peace building built within a post-conflict area, but very few they have been focused how post-conflict democracy, although at the same time have build peace within the post-conflict areas. And we would like to see here tests in Indonesia by comparing two prototype cases of Aceh conflict and Maluku. Next slide, please. This is the way we try to measure whether post-conflict area is successful or failed when they apply post-conflict democracy. They consider it as fail when it do not support democracy development and also not support the democratization, and even it's generate many violence. The example like post-conflict democracy in Angola in 1992. Some of them they have partially successful or partially failed. If the post-conflict election generates stability or peace, but without democracy, how it build peace without democracy, build democracy without peace, or some other any combination. This example include Cambodia, Iraq, Timor-Leste, and many others. And the last one is totally successful. Yeah, it generates peace building, stability, and at this time it also build and grow a democracy like the one in Namibia and El Salvador. Next slide, please. Let's see the first dimension of how to prototype cases between Aceh conflict and Maluku conflict. The first conflict Aceh is, of course, is vertical conflict, the conflict between the Free Aceh Movement and the government of Indonesia. And the second conflict in Maluku is the horizontal conflict, the conflict between Muslim community and the Christianity. The instrument for settlement in Aceh is using the Helsinki Peace Agreement, and in Maluku is using the Malino Second Peace Agreement. And the status of post-conflict election, it is the post-conflict election in Aceh is, of course, is in the part of Helsinki Peace Agreement, while the post-conflict election in Maluku is part of national policy on decentralization. Next slide, please. This is more of the result when we try to compare the application of post-conflict democracy within two states, within two regions. If you look at the level of success, post-conflict Aceh, both of them are partially successful. Post-conflict violence, within the post-conflict Aceh, there are still, intimidation and terror, particularly during 2006 election and 2012, and 2012 getting more increase in terms of the terror and intimidation. While in Maluku, violence and conflict only happen in certain areas like in Tual and in I forgot the one. If you look at the enabling factor of peace building, the factor that have a set of peace in Aceh, it is the integration of the former ex-GAM or GAM members into the center of political powers. So it's really hard. We cannot imagine if the former GAM members the party lose in Aceh, so there will be more instability, conflict, and other things. And the factor that help stabilize a situation in Maluku is what we call power sharing between the Christian and Muslim community in any kind, a sphere of social and political dimension, and also the cultural capital of the Pelagandong as a capital awareness. Both also have challenges, but different and unique. The challenge of post-conflict democracy in Aceh, mostly about the neutrality, money politics, strengthening static democratic values, and the same thing also apply in post-conflict Maluku, neutrality, election, commission member, and politics. Next slide, please. The last one we try to also compare by looking at the variable of governance and peace building in post-conflict Aceh and Maluku. About the accountability, I still tend to be bad in Aceh. Not even different. Or people will say there is no difference between our leadership from GAM or not GAM. Yeah, the poverty is still poverty over there. Are you the governor from GAM or not GAM? There's no difference. The same thing post-conflict in Maluku. There is still group tendency that prioritize certain group. For instance, if the leaders of the region are Muslim, they give priority to the Muslim. Corruption, the same thing, and I don't think this is a very typical regional problem, but even national problem. About transparency, political participation, tend to be good, yeah. But the problem and the biggest challenge is of rule of law. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. So we see that relative to the Aceh conflict, the typical conflict in Southeast Asia, separatist conflict, either in Bangsamoro or in Thailand, or even in Rakhine State, yeah, almost none of typical conflict in Southeast Asia reached a committed peace agreement and applies post-conflict democracy. Only in Aceh, such as the one in southern Thailand and Bangsamoro. The success of post-conflict election and peace building tend to be related to the nature of conflict between vertical or horizontal, and often the first one, or what I mean, the vertical one is always become more challenges. The fact that post-conflict election mostly help consolidate and build peace and democracy together with unique issues like and challenges, shortcoming of post-conflict area or the nature of the conflict. And finally, the important thing we see that democracy, again, democracy can only be consolidated only with the peaceful conflict management is accepted. And at the same time, sustainable peace requires good governance in which all interests, complaints, and disagreements are accommodated through peaceful negotiation and compromise. So altogether, they should come and support each other. I think that's all my talk today. I was happy to receive any comment, input, or question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hasan, for the elaborative presentation. Sebelumnya saya mau merekap sedikit tadi ya presentasinya tadi terlewat. Sebelumnya Profesor Bah menjelaskan tentang it was a Ukrainian war and how he put African lenses towards the issues, and also he find what is it the findings not sure what it is, about the shifts in international relations towards that issues, and also from Pak Hasan kita juga belajar tentang wide range data about conflict dan issues di Southeast Asia dan juga di Indonesia. Pak Hasan juga tadi menjelaskan bagaimana demokrasi itu membutuhkan konsolidasi dan juga rule of laws yang benar-benar terimplementasi dengan baik. Tapi dari kedua beliau ini saya jadi teringat pernyataan Menteri Pertahanan beberapa minggu lalu ya yang di International Forum bagaimana beliau mengcounter international journalist tentang Ukrainian war, bagaimana tidak perlu mengajari Southeast Asia dan people di Southern Global about wars karena kita memang build dari war dan konflik ini gitu. Dan itu tadi dijelaskan secara elaboratif sama Pak Hasan data-datanya dan bagaimana kita memang bangsa ini to some extent terkonstruksi dari war dan konflik itu gitu. Jadi itu saya find it very interesting. And also for the last speaker, and I believe some of maybe most of the women here is waiting for this presentation because it represents the gender perspective, especially on women. So our last but not least speaker is Dr. Ella Prihatini. She is a lecturer at Universitas Islam International Indonesia. She is also an Indo-Pacific Fellow at Perth, US Asia Center, University of Western Australia, and also visiting researcher at National Research and Innovation Agency, or as we call it, BRIN. She earned her doctorate degree from University of Western Australia, her Master of Development Practice Advanced from University of Queensland, Australia, and her bachelor degree was from Gajah Mada University. Her publication and achievements list goes on, but I cannot wait on women's roles in conflict and peace building in local and global contexts. Again, the allocated time is 25 minutes and Dr. Ella, time is yours. Okay, as I need to be very time conscious, so 25 minutes on. All right, good morning, everyone, professors, fellow lecturers, and students. My name is Ella Prihatini, and I will be very happy if you can sit, relax, and join the conversation. I'd like to have this conversation as a form of presentation, but also with your engagement. Yeah, so if I ask questions, please don't be shy. Raise your hands or just shout out your answers. Will we do that? Be okay? Yeah, okay, awesome. So just a quick kind of reminder that gender and women's interest is not only women's interest. The word gender itself is different compared to sex, right? So gender is the relationship between men and women. Yeah, so the relationship may be equal, maybe dominated by one party, or it could be shared equally among the two sexes. Now, gender studies in Indonesia may be something that you want to pursue. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Or something that you are quite alien about. So in this presentation, I'd like to discuss a particular aspect of conflict and peace building. The title of my presentation is Women and Peace Building in Indonesia and Beyond. In the next slide, it's important to discuss. I'm sorry, but I'm more than happy if you can just put full screen on the slides. I don't need to see my face there. A bit awkward. Anyway, so the presence of women in positions of leadership can greatly reduce the likelihood of conflict violence. Do you know that? No, maybe not. But there's a research though suggesting that if gender gap is not too blatantly, appear in the society, then the likelihood of that society to have a conflict is much lesser. Let me repeat. Gender gap in the society can also shape the probability of conflict. Have you heard about this? So if you have gender equal society, the conflict will be less likely, which is great, right? Do you know why? Anyone? Why do you think with more women involved in the society, then the likelihood of conflict is reduced? No? Shy. Okay. From the front, yes. What do you think, ma'am? Why representation matters?
Because having a representation allows women to have a public presence in the society, which means like having women in public presence, you have the opportunity to have a higher education and such, and having a good career. Enhance the equality of gender in the society. So I think that makes the society works together. By having gender equality.
Gender equality will reduce the probability of conflict. I'm not saying that with women involved, things will be all right, all peace. I'm not saying that. But the probability of conflict reduced significantly. This is based on a research. So the agenda, sorry, I have to bring up this first. So the agenda for my presentation consists of 4. First, introduction. The second is where we look at global progress. The third is the context in Indonesia and the region. Lastly is the way move forward from here. Not a Thailand party, move forward. But it's just like another way of saying what recommendations can be built from here. So as an introduction, can we go to the second slide, please? Why representation matters. The second, yes, this is the one. So women as a factor, okay? By including women as a negotiators, mediators, signatories, and witnesses, it increases the probability of an agreement lasting 2 years by 20%. So if there's women involved in the table of negotiation, then the likelihood of that peace agreement to sustain in 2 years at least will increase by 20%. And it will be even greater, 35%, if the looking at 15 years. Can we maintain our peace for at least 15 years? Then if you have women, the likelihood is 35% yes. So moving forward from here, if you're interested into probably Bu Ella just making up this data, no, probably never trust me. Okay, look up for your data by yourself. That's very important. As students, you cannot just chew whatever people tell you. You have to check that again. Check your references. Check your literature. Is that true? Is that correct? Is that updated? The first thing that I want to discuss after the introduction is the global progress. The fourth, the global progress as to how women's participation in the formal peace processes. Next one. Okay, can you see the 3 donut rings? Yeah. What do you think the pictures tells us? Anyone? Yes, please. Excellent. What else? How small is small? I think there's a cutoff area that you can't display. That's right. It's still small. 6% is small, yeah. 6% out of 100. So if we have 100 people here, only 6 women. We'll be like somewhere, But if you're 50, they're like, oh, okay, I can see you. 50, yeah. So imagine that in a room of 100 people, only 6 women as signatories, only 6 women as mediators, and only 13% negotiate. What does it tell us? This is a data from 1992 to 2019, quite recent. What does it tell us? That it tells us that in a global scale, women are still underrepresented, yeah, as part of the the peace building itself. How we create peace, how we maintain peace afterwards. The second slide, in terms of global progress again. Now, once we reach an agreement, can we please move to the next slide? Now, we also look into references to girls and women. What does it tell us? Somewhere from here, I hope. Anyone? The graphs? What does it tell us? When you sign a peace agreement, how often is women, children, girls mentioned? 20%. Only 20%. So 80% never ever, write down about women, girls, and children, not even mentioned there. The conflict is lacking of women's perspectives, children's interests, etc. And the other graph suggests that only 6% in the peace agreement, highlighting the fact that yes, there is a violence towards women, violence against women exists in this conflict. No acknowledgement, meaning no solution. Isn't it right? If you don't acknowledge the problem, then how do you solve the problem? You have to acknowledge first, yes, we have a problem, let's fix it. Now, this is also global data. Lastly, the next slide, in terms of the global progress, we can see that women as peacekeepers. Anyone know what the peacekeepers doing in global conflict? Please? IR students, I know you're aware somewhere. What do peacekeepers do? Yes, please. Okay, peace, peace, peace. Peace, yeah. Okay, what else? Peacekeepers, what do they do? Just, taking selfies. What do they? Yes, please.
Thank you. The women peacekeepers usually patrol around the city that they assign, and they also um, connect with the women or children there. They not also just bringing their weapons to patrol, but they also engage with the community there. And yeah, there are so many things to do aside from just patrolling.
Okay, patrol issues. What is it only unique to women, or men can also approach the society? They can be good bapak-bapak too. What do you think? What's this specific advantage, if I can say, of female peacekeepers? Why do you think they're important? They can be at risk as well because there might still some bombs somewhere. Oh,
I think woman is part of the country that is very important generation because they give birth a kid and we can have next generation of our country, and it's very important thing if we can preserve, protect them, and we know what is the rights for female or woman. I think it's very important, right? Uh, yeah, that's how. Sorry, I'm a
okay.
bit confused. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's great to see students want to speak up in such huge forums. So thank you so much for the
I mean, like,
brave.
Women can, if women understand and
Yeah.
can participate in like political things, they
Yeah.
can represent what is the uh, how to say the things that they want to represent in their
tension.
country.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the main point.
Thank you. So, women as peacekeepers, a topic that you might be interested in for your thesis project, probably. It's very important for us to acknowledge the fact that Indonesian experts in this topic is still rare. So, I think it's very promising agenda for you to pursue in your further studies as well. So, women as peacekeepers have a very strategic and unique positions. One, they can become more of a nurturing and providing sense of security and peace, but also they can understand the issues of violence against women in conflicts, oftentimes without undermining the role of men, but oftentimes that women can speak more openly with another woman. So that's also important aspect as to why we need to have female military personnel or policy personnel. The UN has set a target of 15% of military personnel as peacekeepers and 20% of police personnel. Yet almost half of all troop, contributing countries provided no female at all, either as observers or staff. Surprisingly, countries are still reluctant. There's an anecdotal reason behind it. First, they don't really know whether that's going to be a safe post for women to work as a military or a police personnel. Number two, they are lacking of trainings internally in their country. They don't really know, and it's not a custom for them to send female personnel into conflict situation. but further research is needed as to why the reluctance. What I'm also interested in looking at in these slides is the progress. In 93, there was only 1% of female peacekeepers, assigned to various countries in the world under the UN flag. But by 2017, the number has progressed to 4 and 10 as military and police personnel respectively. Quite a progress. But is this sufficient looking at the pace? We know the progress, we know the rationale, now we want to know the frameworks. The next slide discusses about institutional mechanisms. So let's talk about institutional mechanisms. Under the UN frameworks, there are at least 10 resolutions. 10, okay? Starting from year 2000, and the latest one was in 2019. Please read along the first resolution in 2000. What are the keywords there? The keywords, number 1, is to affirming the importance of women, the role of women participating and contributing in peacekeeping, peace negotiation, and peace building processes. So you begin with affirming, acknowledging, yes, they have a significant role, and then it develops to more and more resolutions, and the last one I put there, more into details as to how and what type of participation you're looking at from women in participating in the peace building processes. It should be full, it should be equal, it should be meaningful. So more details into what participation and how, to what extent. So these are the two sets of development from 2000 to 2019. We can see along the years, 20 years, that more interest been shown in UN frameworks. Last but not least, an important document published in 2010 from the Secretary General stating that we will allocate at least 15% from the budget to support this participation of women in peace building processes. So the money is there, the legal institution is there. In the next slide, I want to take you to regional context. We know that the UN is like, the super body for countries to adhere to. But we also have regional conflicts and threats, right? As mentioned by previous speakers, we also have, if you're familiar with interfaith conflicts, inter-regions conflicts, right? Lots of them. But do you notice that more and more we are now, as a region, encountering issues such as regional instability, Ukraine included, refugees influx, climate change that force people to be displaced. These are the conflicts that maybe 20 or 15 years ago we have that, undermined. But now we're looking at on a daily basis. The regional context brings us to the local context or the national context. In the next slide, I discuss about the experience already been thoroughly discussed by Dr. Hasan about the experience of our own, Aceh and Poso. The main point is, the data suggests that in 2005, when they signed the deal, a Helsinki Peace Agreement, there was only one woman involved in that resolution. Luckily, it doesn't follow the previous statistics because I think we can maintain the peace agreement until today, which is great news. And then
The local also brings us, do you know that in IR we always say it is the domestic politics that shape the foreign policy? Yeah. In the next slide, I discuss about women, peace, and security diplomacy, or we make it short WPS diplomacy. Yeah. So in WPS diplomacy, we're looking at the efforts that have been done by Indonesian government in UN body Security Council. As the president of the Security Council twice, Indonesia promoted gender equality and also looking at more into trainings, capacity building. I highlighted there that regional training in 2019 trained 60 diplomats from ASEAN countries to build about how and what can be done to improve women's participation in peace building processes. Trainings. The next one is also Afghan Indonesian Women Solidarity Network plays a significant role as to how we can help to support Afghan women dealing with conflicts in their own country. Do you think that foreign policy by Indonesia is sufficient, or can we do more about WPS diplomacy? Some would argue that we can do more by promoting, by engaging, and by showing examples, best practices. But also, at the same time, we are being held captive by Papua conflict. It's hard to say, I'm doing really great, but at the same time, in my own backyard, we still have a problem in Papua. As mentioned by Dr. Hasan previously, these are the four, Indonesia has four, ya Pak Hasan, ya? Sorry, has two of four regional conflicts. We got the Aceh and the Papua, mentioned by a presentation by Dr. Hasan. There's another one in Bangsamoro in Philippines and Patani in Thailand. These are the regional conflicts that we need to look into. Can we make it as our best practice and then we exported it to the world through our diplomacy? That's a different question that you can ask. The next one, yes, we're doing really well in pursuing our interest in WPS, but then how far do we walk our talk? Right? We talk, but we don't walk, or we just say, you should do this, you should do that, but you're not doing it yourself. Indonesia, very fortunately, has been showing a very consistent growth in terms of supporting WPS. How do you measure that? Firstly, the first peacekeeping troops, do you know where they sent the first batch? In 1957. Anyone remember? Egypt. So the first peacekeeping troops from Indonesia sent abroad is to Egypt in 1957. All male. And then the progress suggests that I'll read it out for you. The acronym is CONGA 1, comprising 559 military personnel sent to Egypt. And then by 2012, Indonesia had close to 2,000 military and civilian personnel in various UN peacekeeping missions, starting from Liberia, Lebanon, Haiti, South Sudan, Darfur, and southern Philippines. Between 1957 and 2012, Indonesia has sent a total of 25,800 personnel. That's nearing 26,000 personnel, yeah? Comprising military contingents, observers, staff, as well as few hundred civilian police to help UN and a few non-UN peacekeeping programs. So what does it tell us? It tells us that Indonesia has been on the right track in terms of walking their talk, but also we're looking at how we can share this to other countries to follow. The commitment is there, and it pledges to provide more and more female peacekeepers in the future. At the moment, as I speak, it's 183 female peacekeepers
throughout the world. Okay, my time is up. So I'm going to wrap up by suggesting a couple of recommendations. Where do we go from here? We move forward with future endeavors. The next slide, please. It is evident to suggest that track 1 and track 2 diplomacy for women, peace, and security is not sufficient, right, or insufficient. So what we can do from here is to have, I highlight this, affirmative action as to how we can improve women's presence, ensuring that women will be involved in peace-building processes and peacekeeping programs. I want to leave you with these 7 models of inclusion. Stay with me in a couple of seconds. There are 7 models of inclusion. Number 1, direct participation at the negotiation table. You have to be at the table to be able to talk, right? That's number 1. Number 2, observer. If you can't be at the table, can you observe? At least you can observe. Number 3, be the consultant. You may not be sent to Darfur or Sudan, for example, but you becoming in Indonesia can send more female consultants as how we can help. The 4th, inclusive commissions. There should be commissions that, monitoring the level of inclusivity in this peace-building processes. Number 5, problem-solving workshops. Can we have workshops to ask people and to try to build strategies for problem solving? Number 6 is public discussion making. Be in the media, talk about it, discuss about it. And lastly, mass action. Students probably very happy with the 7 model, which is be there, bring your posters, and then make friends. That's also cool because that's included to be one of the type of inclusivity in the progress. Thank you so much for your time, for listening, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ella. Sedikit review dari saya. Tadi Ibu Ella berulang kali mengatakan bahwa gender gap itu, gender equality itu akan mengurangi probability konflik. Itu disebutkan beberapa kali oleh Ibu. Kemudian Ibu juga menjelaskan tentang saat ini global progress itu sedang di posisi apa, dan beliau menjelaskan bahwa so far representasinya rendah, kemudian juga acknowledgement-nya juga masih belum maksimal, sehingga kalau acknowledgement-nya belum ada, maka solusinya juga pasti nggak akan ada karena tidak tak ketahui masalahnya. Kemudian Ibu juga menjelaskan tentang the role of peacekeepers and bagaimana perempuan bisa berperan di dalam peacekeepers itu walaupun saat ini masih lack of trainings. Kemudian jump to the conclusion, Ibu mensuggest tentang enhancing WPS agenda, bagaimana women peace ini diperkuat lagi. Tadi disebutkan ada 7 inclusion. Yang pertama adalah partisipasi secara langsung, kemudian observasi, kalau tidak bisa secara langsung maka setidaknya bisa observasi, kemudian be consultant, inclusive commissions, ada yang setidaknya mengawasi ini gitu ya. Terus kemudian ada problem solving workshops, jadi setidaknya ada workshop untuk menyelesaikan isu equality ini. Kemudian public discussion making, jadi di-encourage untuk lebih membicarakan tentang isu ini, mau di media ataupun di tempat-tempat yang appropriate. Terus kemudian yang terakhir adalah mass action atau aksi secara langsung. Nah, I'm opening the Q&A session. For the first round, I will take 3 questions from the participants here, but the online participants are very welcome to drop your questions in the chat box. The committee will give it to me, and I will read it for you. When you have a question, step forward, mention your name, your question, and to what's whose speaker your questions is delivered to. So let's see. Maybe from this Rio, and then the Safira, and also not seeing the one back behind. Yeah. Okay, so please move forward. Rio, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for every speaker for the very informative speech. My name is Restario Kunia, and I have a question for Professor Abu Bakar. So, as has been addressed by both government from Ukraine and Russia, they will not accept any peace negotiation unless the other side gives up their claim to the contested territories involved. This makes peace difficult to achieve, seeing that the mediation made by countries that either side with Ukraine or Russia or are in the middle failed to convince them to bring peace, such as from Indonesia's defense minister or from African states. Uh, they both failed to convince Russia or Ukraine to hold a peace deal. So, do you think multilateralism is ineffective in bringing peace, especially to regions involved in the Ukraine war? And is this something that we should be focusing on to create in the future? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I am also directing my question to the first speaker, but if the other speaker would like to offer also some insight, it would be helpful. I am curious actually about the role of non-state actors in the paradigm shifts. The material in the presentation mentions heavily about the participation of state, but I'm curious if the presence of non-state actors, especially uh, in context of the third speaker, which is the role of women, if the role of women and other non-state actors can be how do they fit in the paradigm shift, and in the context of Ukraine war, will they offer another options for the Ukraine war to maybe finally have a resolution? That is all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rihanna, for the opportunity. Hello, Mrs. Ella. This is the question regarding to Miss Ella's presentation. Thank you, Miss, for the great presentation. So I'm really interested about the women topic, especially in the conflict and peace building. As we know, there are many women's conference, especially those involving in the policy makers, such as the Forum of the Women Parliamentarian in IPU. And we know that this is also according to the UN Security Council resolution about women, peace, and security, that Indonesia parliaments are really support to the women participation and representations in conflict resolution and peace processes. So one of the objective of this conference is to resolve conflict and promote peace building. Miss. So however, a common problem is that the most of the topic discussed revolve around the security of the women themselves, such as the protecting women during times of a war. So, Miss, what other sectors can women advocate more for in conflict resolutions and peace building besides fighting for the women's right itself? Thank you.
Okay. Maybe we're going to answer the first question to Professor Abu Bakarr from Rio. He was asking about given the background that some countries have already approached this issue and helped Ukraine and Russia to solve the problem, but they decide not to have peace so far. Do you think that multilateral is ineffective? Saying that and there hasn't any progress so far in terms of Ukraine and Russia war. And is this something that we should do more in terms of multilateral approach?
So thank you very much. So there's a common saying that actually peace comes when people lose war. Typically what happens is that if you think that you're winning or you will win, you never go to the peace making table with seriousness. So what is happening in Ukraine, the strategy here is they need a strategy, okay, is to actually make Ukraine deliver enough victories or enough strength to force the Russians to negotiate. So if that happens, in other words, if one group, if one of the parties to the conflict become convinced that they will lose, then they will rush to the negotiation table. And so typically that's a strategy in conflicts. As long as you think that you win, you'll hardly negotiate. Now, there's another also layer of thing to note here. The war in Ukraine is not like what we've been seeing mostly around for the past 15, 20 years, internal domestic wars. This is actually a war that involves superpowers, okay? And one of the things about superpowers is that nobody else can tell them what to do. They won't listen. So the multilateral context here is important. You can see, African leaders go there. You can see BRICS country goes there. But really, that doesn't shift it. What really shifts it here is the calculations of the United States and Russia themselves. And I mean, I hate to sound a little bit disappointing here, but I think it's going to be a long war. I think it's going to be a long war. Now, how the war happens or whatnot, that may be different. But essentially, I think until you convince one party that they will lose, they will not negotiate. So that's where there is a stalemate.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Rio and Professor Abu Bakarr. The next question, I believe, is for Ibu Ella. Safira asked about the role of non-state actors in women peace negotiation. Yeah, I think that's it.
Hi, Safira. Thank you so much for the question. Do you know what track 1 is? Government, excellent. Track 2? Non-government. The problem with non-states, what are the limitations of track 2 diplomacy? Anyone knows? The first one is the government driven, right? Track 1. Track 2 is non-government driven. The limitations are, Pak Hasan want to jump in, please? What are the limitations of track 2? We know that track 1 is sometimes not working because it's too bureaucratic, etc., right? But track 2, why is it not successful sometimes? Why do you think track 2 in diplomacy is not always bringing success? First of all, non-state actors will try the track 2, right? Because that's their area and their capabilities are in track 2. Less bureaucratic, but sustainability is an issue. Donor-driven sometimes is an issue. And also multiple factors arise when you look into the dynamics in the local society. Unfortunately, there are some stigma, if I can say, that certain NGOs will only work with certain people, right? And then certain people feeling left behind, they don't feel included, then they don't want to be part of that program, right? So yes, non-state actors plays a very significant role in whatever issues we're talking about, including the WPS, Women, Peace and Security Agenda, but there are limitations. Being less democratic also brings limitation itself, right? Nobody will take a very serious account if it's not assigned by the ministry or assigned by the president. There's a lack in terms of credentials. So are they voicing the women interests? Yes, they do, and they are very working closely with the track one, which is the government side. But I think it's important to always bear in mind that they are complementing, not replacing. As I said in my last slide, it's not sufficient. We need to do more. If the resolution, is not sufficient because the details are not there, probably what we can do from here is to ask for affirmative action. At least we want, let's say, if there's 10 people in the room to negotiate, at least one is women, for example, right? Or at least if we want to do, peace building trainings, for example, women should be also there, at least 20%. That's affirmative action. Otherwise, we will not move forward. Thank you so much, Safira, once again. Pak Hasan would like.
Also, there is also I forgot that there is also a question, additional question for Safira. She was asking to Professor Abu Bakarr also the same question on where is NGO in the four SIFs paradigm in international relations that you've mentioned. The sovereignty, gravitation towards NATO, those are very state perspective, from state perspective. So she was asking, where is NGO in this Ukraine and Russia? Yeah.
So, so the first and foremost part is just in the delivery of humanitarian aid. But as you know, most of humanitarian aid is actually government money. That is, they just serve as instruments. But I think the more interesting part of your question, if I understand it correctly, is who else can shift things, and also which other force can make a difference. Okay, and I'll give you two scenarios here. Many of the conflicts that have happened, in other countries that doesn't directly involve superpowers, whenever you get too much publicity or too much humanitarian disasters, it generates some kind of public opinion, and sometimes it leads to government to move in one direction. For example, in the United States, the protests against the Iraq war, the protests against the Afghan war, and so on and so forth. So that one. But here's what I wanted you guys to think about very carefully. In the Ukraine war, there are really two publics that matter. Okay? There are two publics that matter. One is the American people, and the other one is the Russian people. The American people matters in the sense that if American public opinion shifts in a way that actually they do not support a government that wants to continue the war, that makes a difference. And vice versa, that is to say, if the American public opinion shift towards supporting a government that is not interested in pursuing the war, it makes a difference in that sense. Currently, I think American public opinion is kind of like mostly indifferent, in part because the Ukraine war doesn't directly affect the American people. They don't know that, most people don't know that their money is being spent in the $73 billion or more. Okay, so that's for the American public. Now, for the Russian public, so my wish is that the best way to resolve the conflict is for the Russian people to rise against their government and say this is wrong. I don't think it will happen for two reasons. One is that authoritarian regimes, they are very good in subverting civil society. They have all kinds of tactics to, to deal with crowds and so forth. So it's difficult actually for the Russian civil society to really, go against the regime. But even more importantly, I think there's enough nationalism in Russia to prevent significant mass mobilization. So if the Russian people mobilize against the regime will change. But the question is whether they will do so. I guess to recap your question, the non-state actors really that matters here is the public of the United States and the Russian public. So we shall see.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bah. The last questions. It's from Athira, and this question is for Ibu Ella. She's asking about what other sectors can women advocate for in conflict resolution and peace building besides fighting for women's rights. All right, Athira, thank you. Where are you? Thank you so much for the question. Just to give you an idea of how, plainly speaking, I think representation matters in all sectors of life. Not only peace building, not only peacekeeping, not only conflict resolution, but all lines of sectors. Why representation matters? Because with representation, we have variety of ideas, variety of aspirations, and the more the heads we have, the more solutions that came up as a solution or options that we can pursue. Not only that, men and women experiencing war differently. If you can recall the early stage of Ukraine invasion of Russia to Ukraine, the first thing that popped up in televisions were what? All Russian males must join the war. They have to leave their family behind. They have, they have to participate in this war. They don't obligate women the same thing. That's when we say the experience in war is totally different. Hence, we can learn from each other as how we can build peace from there. It's also important to note that in peace building processes, women should also find men allies. They cannot just say, I'm a woman, I have to be part of this. Don't be too bragging, You need to create as many allies as possible. That's when you start peace. Not only, the possibility of losing your professor, but sometimes when you have more allies, you're more confident. That's what we also do in building representation of women in various lives, in various sectors in life. So what I'm saying is, there are so many things that we can do in increasing participation of women, in reducing the violence itself, the conflict itself, preventing from the early stage, but also how to make war finish or end it sooner, probably. Unfortunately, I have to agree with Professor Bah. It seems like the war is going to be a long one, despite the fact that we have seen a couple of clips suggesting that Russian, personnel are getting really tired, as well as the Ukraine, of course. But again, I think the next question from here is that where is the woman, or where are the women in this conflict? But I think we need to have another topic on that to be deliberate. Again, thank you so much. I think having representation
is never about exclusion. It's about inclusion. To include more women doesn't mean to exclude the men. So the strategy is always not only about peacekeeping and peace building issues. We always have to include as many as possible parties so we can have that representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bella and Atira. There are two questions from online. The first one is for Pak Hasan. It's actually look-alike Safira questions on the role of non-state actors within the conflict in Indonesia. Yeah, Southeast Asia or Indonesia. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Let me take the Aceh. Yeah. First, I would like to take Aceh, and then second, would like to take the most recent cases of Rohingya. Looking at the case of conflict in Aceh and during peace, Helsinki peace agreement, although it mostly involve non-state actors, non-actors that coming to the table. Marty Ahtisaari during that time is not representing any state at all, although he used to be the prime minister of Finland. But when he served as the mediator during the negotiation table, he didn't represent any state. So, and Pak Yusuf Kala during the time, it's not representing any state or Indonesia. So during the negotiation table and after the negotiation table and peace building and peace after that, most of the non-state actors, the roles, engagement, and everything is more dominant than state. And this really helped how the peace in Aceh was established. The biggest challenge is not the biggest challenge is the most current cases in Southeast Asia, which is the one is in Rakhine State or in Rohingya, and the second one is actually in Patani. Probably everybody and people in the world they don't hear anything bad about what happened in Patani because it is the capacity of the government how to locate, how to control what happened actually in Patani. But if you come to the Patani, you can find that every day you can find every people died, every people injured, but almost none of the people in the world hear about that. And the same thing actually, and the worst one, of course, what happened in Rakhine State. We see that almost almost million people are displaced from the Rakhine State to the Cox's Bazar in Cambodia, and so many genocide, ethnic cleansing, ethnic crime, etc. But very unfortunate, almost none. The international community, non-state actor, even state actor that come to this, this kind of situation. So sometimes we see newly coined concept, but not really most popular actually, what we call the R2P, responsible to protect. I think we need to responsible to protect, particularly if we refer to the case what happened in Rohingya. We need responsible the international community as well to do the interference, to save the humanity, to save the people that experience any cleansing and genocide. We cannot just let the Myanmar government and the Thai government do whatever they want, doing the genocide and the cleansing. But until now, we don't see any that kind of effort out, from the international community, even because this is very unfortunate and really sad to hear about this Southeast Asia. So, of course, looking at the case of South Asia, we would like to, suggest and invite other particularly non-state actors, international community to all together, interfere in what happened in Patani and what happened in Myanmar. Mostly the state are like Myanmar, using the pretext of the non-possibility of the ASEAN, or even the state sovereignty. But with the responsibility to protect, actually every international community, as strongly suggest, to also intervene if there is the cases of ethnic cleansing, genocide, crime, etc. So this is unfortunate, and still very the role of non-state actor is still very limited right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Hasan. There's also another online question to Ibu Ella. She said that as your experiences, what is the most role that played by women in many peace building program from 7 role you've mentioned?
So I think from the 7 models of inclusion, the higher, sorry, the smaller the number, the more elitist. Because the number 1 is to participate at the table to discuss about and to negotiate. So that's very elitist. You will only be the key, key changers, if you can say, or the key players. Then you will be at that table. So the lower the number or the bigger the number, the more inclusive in a way, because everybody can go to the street, right, and then make a protest, and then express your concerns, etc. So what we need to do from here, the way we move forward, is to cover the steps. Maybe we can start from mass action and then escalate, and then escalate, and then escalate. Because as the data suggests that it is very small number of women participating as negotiators, let alone signatories or witnesses, for example. But again, if the population is 50-50, that means half of the victims are women, right? At the very least. So answering to your question, I think women are now still, be part of the mass action. They can do that freely, because they're not yet part of the elites. But why not, starting now, we demand for more inclusion for women in the part of making peace in their society, because they are also the 50% of the victims. If you're interested in looking at the presentation and the sources, I provided the link to each document that I cited in my presentation, so feel free to have that from the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bella. I think this is also another question online for Professor Bah. She was asking, as a sociologist, where do you put sociology perspective in this Ukraine and Russia war?
So, I guess it's a long answer. So the root of studies of conflict in sociology goes back to Karl Marx, and most of that conflict was construed as class conflict. Okay, that is conflict between rich and poor in a capitalist society, or those who control capital and the proletariat. So for a lot of sociology, that was what they understood as as conflict. Sociology, at least in the United States, is not very, very international. It's only fairly recently, but political science and others, anthropology have been. Then American sociologists at least began to talk of race as a form of conflict. Okay? So you move from class to race, and then we talk of ethnicity. Ethnicity as another mode of conflict. Now, especially as you move from Western countries to non-Western countries or to developing countries, the language changes. In the Western countries, typically they use the language of nations races, class. As you move to developing countries, they use more the language of ethnicity or tribe, so the, quote unquote. Yeah. So the study of ethnic conflicts is highly sociological, but mostly in the South. Okay? And the Ukraine war is interesting. I know that a lot of people will not want to say this, but another way really to frame the Ukraine war is an ethnic conflict. And that's one way you can frame it. I don't know, I'm not sure everybody will agree, but that's one way to frame it. Because if you go back to the, to the fall of the Soviet Union, what happened in Ukraine and along the place is the situation in which, different ethnic groups, they call themselves nations, but they're ethnic groups across the place were in different territories. So you have Russians in the Baltic states, you have Russians, ethnic Russians in Ukraine, and so on and so forth. So the population was mixed. And Ukraine actually happened to be one of those countries in which you had ethnic Russians, ethnic Ukrainians, and others. So if you go back to the Velvet Revolution and the way the conflict began there, it was largely, quote unquote, pro-ethnic Russians in the east, I believe, and then Ukrainians in the western part of the country. So there's an ethnic dimension to it. But of course, it's far much more complicated because Ukraine, the western part of Ukraine, typically was aligned more with the West. They wanted to they embrace liberalism more, and they wanted to be part of the West. So hence the gravitation towards NATO and the involvement of that. So to summarize it really, one sociological perspective into the Ukraine war is the role of ethnicity and nationalism in that is the domestic aspect of the conflict in Ukraine. Then of course, in addition to the domestic, you have to add the geopolitical part of it, which brings in NATO and others. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so another round for offline participants. Okay, ada Mbak Eska. Maybe participants from other departments, sociology, politics. Okay, Mbak. Oke, mungkin SK dulu Oke, Masnya ya. Habis ini berarti SK, Mbak dan Masnya. Mic-nya. So thank you for the time. I've written as a student here. And hello, Buela. I hope you still know me. And yeah. It's really nice to having you here. This is FISIP UIN Jakarta. Welcome and enjoy FISIP. So I have 3 questions, of course. Each speaker, I have 1 question. The first one is goes to Professor Bakarr Bah. We talk about the Ukraine war and strategic shift in IR, and its possibility of a multipolar peace. So my question is, where is peace in UK? Because the peace is peaceful thinking in area conflict or. Mbak Eska, mohon maaf, boleh kembali ke hingga kedengaran. Okay. Where is conflict? Where is peace in area of conflict? For the example, in Ukraine, because peace is a wishful thinking. We know war in Ukraine happened in Europe, only in Europe.
but we have so many obstacle when it happens because the influence the economic social system of the Europe and affect to economic of Europe, political system and sociological of society. Uh, so if you talk about peace, we need uh, like Galtung. Galtung said there is no peace. So what we need is to reduce or decrease the conflict. Because if you have so strong weapon, it means you are not safe. It means you have a lot of enemies. So we need this decrease the conflict, not to stop the conflict immediately or radical. And the second question is goes to Buela. Finally, I have a question for you. I found a conflict in Ambon Yachts, Maluku. We know it many years ago. Reconciliation in Ambon after the conflict bring the society in there separate between Catholic, between Christian and Muslim, and they give the name of the society of Christian and Muslim is segregation. In segregation, many people, let's call it parents, and especially their mother, said to their children, please stay away from the kids that you are not part of them. It means, tolong jaga jarak dari orang yang tidak sepemahaman dengan kita dalam konflik etno-religius. Karena kalau kamu mendekat ke sana, kita bisa meledakkan konflik yang lebih besar. That is called master naratif yang bersifat negatif. Artinya, peran gender di situ sangat negatif karena memberikan asumsi yang bersifat turun-temurun cerita rakyat kalau kelompok yang berbeda dengan mereka adalah musuh mereka. That is we call it rekonsiliasi yang menimbulkan sekresi tetapi tidak jaga baik-baik akan muncul yang dibawa oleh peran seorang ibu. Gendernya lebih ke master naratif yang bersifat negatif. Kemudian post konflik tadi rekonsiliasi. After rekonsiliasi comes what we do next. To Pak Hasan Ansori. Indonesia is pluralist, but we have pluralist is our new obstacle always. If humans still if population still growth in Indonesia, it means so many conflict will come immediately, and we know it can stop radically. Mau di stop radikal seperti apa gitu? Adanya malah perceraian. Jadi perdamaian itu bentuknya apa? Is it wishful thinking or how? I refer to Buzan, Kant, and Cynthia in law. Or the last one is Kant, Cynthia in law said to Kant, man, state, and war. Lelaki itu selalu suka berperang, tetapi perempuan pun mereka bisa melihat dia membawa master naratif. Cerita rakyat diturunkan turun-temurun. Efek dari peran gender ini lebih suka menyampaikan berita yang tidak pada ranah laki-laki untuk menyampaikannya. Mungkin itu bisa diteliti, tapi saya dalam bidang gender sangat sedikit sekali ilmunya. Itu saya temukan dalam case Ambon ya, Ambon Yachts, konflik di Ambon. Terima kasih. Waktunya semoga tidak kebanyakan pertanyaan saya ya.
Mbak Eska, mohon maaf tadi untuk Pak Hasan, saya mau clarify. Pertanyaannya tentang peace bentuknya apa ya? Itu bukan. Mbak Eska mau clarify pertanyaan untuk Pak Hasan itu adalah peace bentuknya apa dalam konflik di Indonesia atau gimana? Oke. Okay. Okay. The second question will be from.
Good afternoon. My name is Kanaya, and I have a question for Ibu Ella. So, as you know, Gen Z is very involved in social media, and we know that there is a rise of a mass action of feminism in social media, which obviously it's such a great representation of women as it speaks for their perspectives. But as you said before, that the second actor, there's not much improvements on advocating women, because there is a rise of stigma that certain ideology might resist feminism. So my question is that to provide the mobility of this mass action, who would we want to approach in the society, and how are we going to provide the inclusivity in the society? Thank you.
Okay, last question from Masnya.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. So firstly, I would like to thanks Mr. Hasan Ansori for the presentation. That I think it is really give me so much insights. So speaking of the conflict that happened in Indonesia, so I believe most of us know that in 2001 there was a conflict in Kalimantan. It is a tragedy that called Sambit War, the confrontation between ethnical Dayak and Madura. And so I'm truly I feel so ironic that this conflict left so many brutality in the uh, between these two ethnical conflict. So my first question is, what is the role of democracy in conflict resolution in this Sambit war? And my second question is, so we know that Indonesia has so many diverse ethnical and so you know uh, language and race and the society itself. So learning from the Sambit war tragedy, so how can we prevent this this kind of conflict in the future? Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to read Mbak Eska question. The first one for Professor Bah. She was asking, where is peace in area of conflict, specifically in Ukraine, given the chaos that has happened there? Basically, that was the question.
Thank you. So the question here really is, instead of focusing on conflict, we should focus on peace. So there are two things here in the Ukraine war. Okay, one is from the IR, that is international security, and the other one is more from anthropological, sociological terms in terms of peace, conflict and peace. Yeah? So I'm going to focus first on the peace part of it. If you're not, you should read actually the work of Galtung. Galtung is the founding figure behind the study of peace and conflict. And in the study of peace and conflict, there are different degrees of, I guess, different ways in which people talk of peace. Okay? And at the minimum level, peace means the absence of violence. Okay? That is the minimal level of peace. So in other words, if you have, if people are not fighting physically, then you have peace. But the literature on peace and conflict soon realized that actually you can have what is called structural violence. In other words, you can have violence that is based on varying forms of discrimination, which creates, conditions for physical violence. Yeah? So that evolved into actually what is called positive peace. Positive peace means not just the absence of violence, but essentially the creation of the conditions for sustainable peace, for inclusivity, and all those things that will actually prevent people from engaging in conflict. So I think to go to the question here, if you think of actually Ukraine, to focus on peace will assume that somehow, Russia and Ukraine within itself is moving towards positive peace. Now, this brings me to the second part of the issue. What is happening in Ukraine is also a matter of international security, because it's geopolitics. Okay? And in the studies of democracy, there is an international relations, there is a common observation, and that is democracies do not go to war with one another. It's a very common observation that two countries that are democracies do not fight war. Why do people make that observation? And it's very similar to the idea of positive peace. The idea is that if countries actually share common values about human rights, liberalism, and so forth, most likely they will not fight. Okay? So what you see in Ukraine here is, so to focus on peace really will assume that both Ukraine and Russia will actually have shared kinds of political values. And that's a big problem, because the direction of Russia is not based on liberalism, whilst the direction, this one part of Ukraine wants to embrace liberalism, Western liberalism, that is political democracy and free market systems and so forth, whilst Russia is going in a different direction. So I think it's difficult to, so in Ukraine, I mean, first and foremost, they have to reach the first level of peace, and that is simply the absence of violence. Until they can actually move in a similar direction in terms of political values and economic values, creating the conditions for positive peace will be actually very difficult. And by the way, very few countries actually have conditions for positive peace. Very few. So to some degree, I mean, positive peace is almost like an ideal. You should look at some of the indexes, like the Positive Peace Index, the State Fragility Index, and so forth. You will see the countries that rank very high at the best in those indexes are countries that are small. Most Scandinavian countries, small, not diversified, have a lot of kind of commonality. So, but the more you move to countries that are diverse, whether domestically or across countries, positive peace or the absence of structural violence is extremely difficult to achieve, because in a sense, structural violence is all forms of discrimination. Thank you.
Maybe for Hasan, because the questions.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to also participate in comment on the sociology perspective on the Ukraine, because I'm also a sociologist. I just try to contribute looking at from the sociological lens. As a sociologist studying a couple of years on the peace and conflict, I come to a sort of theoretical belief. Oftentimes and many times, I don't believe about the variable of ethnicity and region as a driving force of conflict. Let me show you. you'll probably see the fight between Shi'i and Sunni. And you often hear about this conflict in Indonesia. You find a lot of people, or Sunni, or Shi'i people in Bandung, but they will peacefully live hand by hand with the Sunni and never have any conflict between Shi'i and Sunni in Bandung. But why the Sunni and Sunni, they get conflict in Madura a couple of years? I was sent there by President Jokowi at the time to settle this. Why? Can you imagine? There is nothing related to the religion. If the religion as the structure and automatically driving people to conflict, this should also happen, the conflict between Shia also in Bandung. Why in Bandung doesn't happen, but in Madura happen? So there will something beyond the religiosity or ethnicity that drives the conflict. If only religion, again, and ethnicity, driving and automatically driving people to conflict, so what happened in Madura should be also happen in Bandung. So again, I would like to emphasize that ethnicity and religiosity always only relevant and become salient when it is interact with the political economic interest. One thing that we can apply also to the Ukraine war, you see, and I believe as well, the political interest is the first and the biggest driving force of Ukraine. The Russia, like the land acquisition, the threat from Russia, from NATO, etc., and then become the conflict, and then they try to to frame the ethnicity, the other regarding and social aspect, etc., also to legitimize the Ukraine war. So at the deep of the Ukraine war, it is political economic interest, and again, I believe that ethnicity in Crimea, and I think they are framed in order that to legitimize the war. And the second, I would like to respond to Eska about the conflict in Ambon. I know that I spent a couple of years to do research, and the theme is post-conflict segregation. Mostly, the main cause of the conflict in Ambon is, of course, segregation. The difference between Christianity and Muslim. So when the conflict was settled, and then most of the people become IDPs, internationally displaced people, and then they were given option to be relocated. And the problem is most of the IDPs, they tend to be and they're willing to be relocated to the area where they have similar communities, similar identities, etc. So the settlement, the peace settlement in Ambon, create the new segregation. The segregation that was never found before the conflict. So the segregation in Ambon, after the conflict, becomes stronger than before the conflict. Because of the process and mechanism of relocation that really not well managed, and just give option to people, where do you want to be relocated? Of course, I want to be relocated to the area where they have the same identity with me. And this is the create new, and this is really bad policy of the government, again. But the good thing for the peace in Ambon is power sharing. This is at least the driving force that maintains stability right now. So if the governor Muslim, so more or less should be the vice from Christian house, etc. And the same thing happened in other department of the Ambon. Should be power sharing in school. If the rector is from Muslim, the vice rector should be Christian. So this is as the principle that Israel have been very strong, held by the people and the leaders in Maluku. And again, the problem in Indonesia, the multiculturalism or pluralism of the different cultures in Indonesia should not again be seen as the source of problem, but it should be source of the rich, because the very beginning, our country is very diverse in terms of religion and culture, and this has become Pancasila. This country only possible with the negotiation of these differences, and this has become the Piagam Jakarta and Pancasila. with only Pancasila, we can right now become one unit Indonesia. Without that, so this country is just negotiation of all the differences. Without that negotiation, from the very beginning, we will not never find Indonesia. So again, we have to be tolerant. We have to also appreciate the differences. This is the only thing we can find. We can maintain Indonesia. Without that, I think it's possible. And you know, again, as a given from the beginning, we are diverse. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Hasan. Itu juga menjawab pertanyaan masnya ya sekalian. Okay, so the questions for Ibu Ella from Mbak Eska. She was talking about the negative gender role that was played during the Ambon conflict. Yeah. So maybe your opinion. So yeah, Mbak Eska, thank you so much for the question. Thank you. I think when you raise a very critical question about narratives, yeah, I think we can argue at length about how do narratives play a role in conflict, from the early stage, the middle, and then the end of the conflict. I totally have I have never came across the literature, particularly looking at how mothers are, how do you say, passing these negative narratives across generations, right? I've never came across to the literature, but probably they have done that, but I just never read it. But the narratives are crucial. Let's say if misperception building up to more of a segregation and feeling of exclusion, and then you will have possibility of getting into a conflict situation larger than before, right? What I'm trying to say is that narratives are not unique to motherhood. Sometimes father can also passing those narratives, but probably because the domestic role that women have in most households in Indonesia, then we assume that probably don't be friends with those who are not in the same faith with you, that those narratives probably shape the way we see others. But I think it also not unique for Indonesian society to have in their immediate relatives, they're Christians and they're Muslims, they're Hindus, right? But the problem here that I totally agree and share the same opinion with previous speakers, Prof. Bah and also Pak Hasan, Dr. Hasan, when it comes to conflict, it's never singular cause. It's never just because, have you heard about the reason why or the possible reason why conflict in Sampit occurred? Or Poso? Have you heard about, it was, very trivial, for example. Conflict is never trivial. It's systematic. And it develops over the years. So narratives play a role, yes, but we have to assess again to what degree that can shape the conflict to start. I think that, can I ask the second question from Tinaya? So Tinaya, thank you for the question. If we have a very quick response, yeah, like a quick survey in this room, can I do that? When you heard the word feminism, raise your hand if you think it's a negative thing. Raise your hand if it's, don't be shy. Feminism. Feminist. No. I rephrase. Raise your hand if you think it's a positive term. Feminism. Budekan also. Okay. The others, I would assume, afraid? So the word feminism, there's a study about this in particular. In Indonesia, how safe is the word feminism?
for you to use. The conclusion is it's not that safe. If you want to promote gender equality, avoid the F word, which is feminism, not the other F, yeah? Avoid the feminism word. So if you pay attention to the women's centers across universities in Indonesia, what do they use? Women's Studies Center, yeah? What else? Pusat Kajian Wanita, ya? PSW, yeah. What else? Why do they hesitate about using the word feminism? It's popular in social media, I agree with you. But for people who are working in this sector, they feel a bit unsafe to use the word feminism. Probably generational gap explains this, but I don't think so because I saw this side has not raised their hands, while this side is more into it, raising their hand. So what I'm saying is that ideology might shape how we perceive the world. That brings me to the idea as to where are the women in Ukraine conflict? Have you start to begin asking that? Where are the women as negotiator, as spokesperson? Can you came across to these female figures in international politics? Do we have one? Yahoo! Exactly, we have one. Do we have two? She visited the country during conflict. Who is she? Our students, you have to know this. First Lady Diplomacy. What did she do? She visited Ukraine with our president. So there's a diplomacy by First Lady to come to the conflict area to invite for G20, right? So where are the women? The women are there, right? Indonesia walking the talk as to how we can approach this. And lastly, I just want to answer the last question from the back. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but I think I really like the idea when the young generations are now talking about prevention, how to not get into conflict, or how we build and maintaining peace. I have a couple of notes that I can share with you. Number one, I think this is very obvious from our slides. The one and the foremost important is inclusivity. Don't be too exclusive. Be inclusive. Okay? Invite people. Don't be too gang, having your gangs, your own circles. That's what we call it in Jaksel, right? Your circle's not my circle, okay? So be inclusive. Start from yourself. So people will minimize their misassumption about you because they don't know you. They have more misassumptions. The more inclusivity, the better. And reduce discriminatory regulations, or build a more create more development that is pro to inclusive development. Number two, the foremost important thing is what you're doing at the moment. Educate, educate, educate. Tell them that, those are myths, and this is your task to bust all those myths through education. And lastly, also Dr. Hasan mentioned this in his slide, democracy is not enough. Democracy, if your perception about democracy is free to elect your leaders, that's not enough, because the most important part is how substantive is that democracy to you. You vote for your leaders, but do they listen to you once they are elected? So important to make sure that your democracy, our democracy, is more responsive and substantive. Not just every 5 years, we have to do this, done. And in the next 5 years, we same over the same battle. Yeah, like, you know the things, right? So thank you so much for the question. I really like the last question from the floor. Thank you.
I would like to add and share the picture of the conflict in Poso. And I think about this, I will go to Poso as well. One thing that we would like to know about Poso is just one of the hardest part of terrorism. But if we try to draw from the very beginning, actually, it is the effect of the unfair settlement that happened in Poso. So when the conflict in Poso was settled, the conflict between Christian and Muslim was settled, and then the Muslim people feel that the peace settlement as a package is not fair for them. They think that Muslim Christian community have more privileges than to their fellow Muslim, and they think and they believe this is not fair of peace agreement. So and part of the radical Muslim, and then they become terrorists right now with Santos and the people. Actually, all the effect of unfair peace settlement in Poso. And right now, actually, we provide a training, a de-radicalization. We invite 20 Christian, 20 Christian radical and 20 Muslim radical all together in the room right now. I will be opening within a couple of days ago, but this is and most of them are the ex-combatant, and most of them just released from the prison. So this is very challenging, and let's see what happens when all the radicals from the two groups are getting together, and because this is the we can do to make the real and the impactful peace in Poso. So this is just a broader sharing about what happened in Poso for the public. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. Is there any question for the last round? Okay, Giovanni. Who else would like to ask? Okay. Okay then, Giovanni, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you for the time. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Giovanni Hasan. You can call me Afan. And actually, I had question for Mr. Professor Bakarr Bah, but I think this question is almost same with the previous question. It's about Ukraine war, but I think I will try to ask it. So, based on your analysis, Professor Bakarr Bah, what is the best solution for Russia and Ukraine war? As we know that this conflict already ongoing for around 1 year since Russia invades Ukraine on 24th February 2022, but until now there is still no clarity that shows the settlement or solving of this war. So it is like the conflict is in stalemate of deadlock. Well, we can say that this conflict or war is complicated and complex because of the proxy war, but we do need the solution for this, because the thing that we are concerned is the World War III that could happen in the future if this war keeps going on. And the last question for our speakers. Regarding our topic today, as we can see in the big slide in front of us, conflict and peace building. So the question is, how is the conflict and peace building based on Islam perspective? Because I think this question is interesting question because we are Islamic University student. Thank you very much for the time.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not in a good condition, so I need to put my mask on. Well, I'm not a woman, that's obvious. But I do have a concern about this kind of issue. I reckon this is gonna be sensitive, so I deeply apologize if this gonna offend anyone. So based from what I got recently, from what I know, feminists are actually fight for equality, but turns out some of them want beyond than that. So by saying we don't need men whatsoever, da da da, especially these statements are coming from the Western country, for instance, the USA. So is this gonna affect the peace building or gonna be a threat by any change? I just curious what Dr. Ella, what do you think about this from a woman point of view, and how do you respond this? And does Australia facing the same thing like the USA does? Thank you very much.
Okay, maybe for Professor Bah first. He was asking about the best solution for the Ukraine and Russia war.
Yeah, so I think I had somebody ask what's an Islamic perspective there. I'm not an Islamic scholar, but I will tell you this: Ittaqullah wa la Ittaqullah wa la taf'alu fashada fil ard. Fear your Lord and do not spread corruption on that. Okay, that would be the Islamic answer. Now, so the Ukraine. So I'll tell you what I think is the ideal solution, and I don't think that is what is likely. But I think the ideal solution here is for the Russian people to rise up against the actions of their government and force their government to withdraw from Ukraine. That's the most ideal solution. If the people of Russia rise up against Putin, able to force him, then the guns will side. I don't think that will happen for all kinds of reasons. So the likely part here, Henry Kissinger, at the beginning of the war, he had some suggestions, and everybody said, "Get out of here." Okay? But his suggestion was that somehow it's a kind of like what is called in political science, it's called realist kind of approach. And his idea was that, well, you know, nuclear weapons, but maybe Russia can put you what? What would have well, I don't know how much of that you caught, but anyway, so as I was saying, I think the ideal solution here is for the people of Russia to rise up against their government, force their government to withdraw from Ukraine. I think that's the ideal solution. I don't think that will happen. What is more likely to happen is going to be a continuous stalemate. So at the beginning of the war, Henry Kissinger, the renowned American diplomat, made suggestions that maybe to end the war, Russia can keep some of Ukrainian territory, and they will promise not to mess up with Ukraine anymore, and maybe that will work. Ukraine said no, for obvious reasons, of course, because they think that they can win with NATO. Now, Henry Kissinger was opposed because from a principle standpoint, it violates a basic principle. Russia is taking somebody's territory, which is not right. Okay? But I guess where I'm going here is to think of this more in realistic, in the terms of realism. This is not an idealized kind of solution. It's a matter of like realism. So I don't see a solution anytime soon. What I really see here is a containment of the conflict, in the sense that the conflict do not go to nuclear weapons. I don't think it will. But most of this will continue to fight a little bit longer. And again, as I said before, as long as one party think that they will win, they will keep on fighting. So there are various kinds of peace plans out there. Okay, But they really all doesn't matter because the peace plans Ukraine says will not stop as long as we don't get back all our territory. Russia saying we're not going to give back, certainly not Crimea. So you can see, so they're going to keep on fighting like this for some time. I guess how will it end in the long run? So if it doesn't, so if you do not have a revolt in Russia or a significant political change in the United States, that is to say, if you have a mass movement in the United States when they elect a government that doesn't want to be involved in international issues. I'm not calling names, but one of those scenarios will actually reduce the war very quickly. In the absence of that will be a continuous stalemate, and it depends on really what China does. Okay, if China wants to make sure that Russia doesn't lose, they will help them in some ways. So I think I don't really have an answer. So if I do have an answer, it's easy. But this is going to be a continuous stalemate. It depends on essentially two things: what happens in the United States, what's the capacity of the Russian people, and what China does. This is really what matters here.
Pak Hasan, maybe the second question on how's the conflict and peace building in Islam perspective.
Thank you. This is big pressure for me as a lecturer at the Islam State like this. But of course, I'm not Islamic studies person. But one thing, during my study on the issue, I come also across to the Islamic perspective on the thing. In Islam, most of people refer to the word sulh, as-sulh. As-sulh means peace, yeah, or perdamaian. But within the framework of conflict resolution, the concrete or the realist model that was we found and it is developed in the US, in the Western, and this is mostly influenced by the liberal values. But we see also the important thing that we need also to to imagine. We say what we call is ADR, alternative dispute resolution. So there are a wide variety of local model, alternative model of conflict resolution that involve the local wisdom. For instance, let's say in the Philippines they say Mungkalon, and in Ambon they have also Pelagandong and many others. And in Islam, actually in Islam there is no specific model that people can resolve the conflict. The model and thing is actually surrendered to the political, to the local wisdom or local identity. For instance, like in Indonesia, of course, Indonesia, because we have a different Islam as well compared to other Islam in for instance in Middle East. Most Muslim people in Indonesia, when they talk about conflict resolution, they can take the model of pesantren. Within the pesantren, kiai or religious leader, most often when they deal with the conflict, kiai become the mediators. So when there is a pesantren within the a certain area, and then it's a conflict happen between the people, and most of the people rely on the kiai and invite the kiai to be the mediator. So we call it this is mediation. Of course, if you compare to the Western model of conflict resolution, the mediations is very strict. We have go in between, we have caucus, and then second caucus, etc. But oftentimes this Western model doesn't apply to the rest of the world when and often the local model or the alternative model more applies in certain words. Again, for instance, you have a conflict or problem with your neighbors, and then sometimes it is more applicable that we invite our religious leader to be our mediator rather than we invite as the arbitrator or mediator which have legal standing. So and again within the Islamic framework, we don't really have any specific model, specific steps, stages, etc. Like what the Western develop right now, but it depends on the culture, on the social identity, when you can develop your conflict resolution. But Islam have only introduced the basic principle of sulh, of the peace, that the Islam as religion, suggests, all these followers believe that thing to, to resolve, to, to prioritize the sulh of the peace rather than the conflict. So this is, at least to the best of my understanding and knowledge about the perspective of conflict resolution in Islam. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. We actually have 30 minutes more. Is there any question or? Oh, oh yeah. Sorry, Buela. I think it's from Ilyas. Yeah. Okay. So Ilyas mentioned about the narratives of feminism, that at some point there are negative narration of feminism, like saying we don't need man, or there apa, kita nggak butuh laki-laki, kemudian perempuan harus lebih dimajukan dan sebagainya gitu ya, Elias ya. Dan bagaimana narasi feminis yang seperti ini tadi mempengaruhi conflict resolution and also peace itself.
Oke, Ilyas ya. Ya, terima kasih untuk pertanyaannya. Jadi gado-gado Jaksel. Okay, thank you for the question, Ilyas. If I got your question correctly, yes, as any other ism, there's a spectrum, right? So that goes the same with feminism. There's a spectrum of feminism, but there's the ultra right or ultra left, right? And there's normally people will be in the middle. So what I'm saying is, in peace building and conflict negotiation or conflict management, what we don't need is an additional drama, right? So if you want to achieve peace, then first things first is to accommodate parties involved, and excluding men in the process, I never think it's part of a solution, right? But oftentimes the system excluded women, right? So my presentation has been about demanding more of share in which women can participate in the process. To give you a personal background, my research, my PhD research is looking at women's representation in parliament. So if you know our DPR, right, our parliament, we need more women to represent women. But then again, some people are reluctant. If they voice that demand, they will be labeled as a feminist. Question is back to the person who wants to raise that question. Do we need to become a feminist first to ask that? Because in Canada, the leader, the ruler at the moment, he said 50-50 for the cabinet positions. Why? Because it's 2015, 2019, 2020, you know. So it doesn't take a feminist first to acknowledge that we need more women to be represented in the, peace building processes. I personally don't label myself as a feminist because I don't think I need to label myself to know what needs to be there. And I was acknowledge that UIN has always tried their best to provide no more manual, in their forums, in their events. That's an excellent step. You begin with that. Don't women also have the knowledge to share, as if only men understand the topic? Because statistically speaking, as you can see across this room, I think more than half of students are female, right? So meaning in knowledge production, women are there. So why can't they be heard? when we exchange ideas like this forum. So I understand that. Do you have you came across to the phrase of incel? These are a group of minority male who hates women, and they retract themselves from the society, so they are behind the screens normally, and saying nasty words about feminists do that, feminists do that. There's studies about incel. So again, a spectrum of men who hates women. So I don't think that's what we need at the moment. What we need is to build more inclusivity processes instead of excluding people. I hope that answers your question. If not, I'm happy to talk. Thank you. All right then. Is there any question? Last round. Okay, if there's, it's actually 20 minutes. Can we? There's one more. Yeah. Okay, the last one. Please proceed to the center. Yeah. Yeah, do you wanna ask? Ya, silakan ke tengah.
Yes, awesome. Okay, very good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for the opportunity that gives to me to ask, and also thank you for all of speakers that amazing based on their perspective and their uh, international seminar. Yeah, okay. Actually, I have before that I introduce myself. My name is Mohammad Bintang. I'm a second year student, specifically fourth semester at Syarif Hidayatullah State Islamic University, majoring in International Relations Study Program with strong interest in conflict resolution, peacekeeping, and peace building. Okay, I have a question for Dr. Ella, especially about women, peace, security. Based on your explanation, we know that women, peace, and security, it's very important things that we should encourage, we should promote it. So my question is, as we know in Indonesia, we already implemented national action plan 2014 until 2019 is about women, peace, security. And my question is, based on your perspective, has Indonesia National Action Plan for Women, Peace and Security is already effective? Because based on your explanation, we should encourage more and promoting more women, peace and security. If I'm not mistaken, you already mentioned 6 or 7 points that we should, like the example, like we should promoting in social media, and we should learn more about that. So my question, like what I said before, has Indonesia National Action Plan for Women, Peace and Security is already effective? Okay, I think that's all. Thank you so much for the chance.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much. I'm happy if after seminars like this, students starting to consider, oh, maybe I should take that as my skripsi project, yeah, from now on. So happy to, to discuss further with you. I know everybody's very hungry, this is lunchtime, but I just want to quickly address your question. Yes, that is totally correct. We already have the NAP, the National Action Plan for 2014-2019. And one of the key success stories would be the UN resolution passed in 2019 that is also under our presidency. So if you want to make a huge applause to our Minister of Foreign Affairs, this is it. Because I think under her leadership, Indonesia managed to, persuade and to convince other countries in the Security Council to pass this into more details. If you remember the slides, that it has more details into it. What type of participation of women should have in WPS agenda? It should be full, equal, and substantive. I think the thing that we also need to understand is that remember the stats suggest that only half adhere to the resolution. So what happened to the rest of the half, right? So there's more things can be done under UN Security Council to ensure that all member countries are adhering to the resolutions. If they are sending troops, peacekeeping peacekeepers troops, they need to ensure that they do also send the female personnel. Security issues will always be their priority, but there are always options. It can no longer be acceptable to have zero representation of women in this field. I guess I want to leave that to you with that last sentence. Thank you so much once again.
Okay, so I think that was the last answer for the last question. Maybe please give another round of applause for the speakers. Thank you so much again for the speakers, for your time and your presentations, and also for the all participants here offline or also online for your contributive participations. We were able to have a joyful and fruitful discussions. So on behalf of the committee, I would like also to apologize for any inconvenience that I may done. And thank you so much. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Check. Well, everyone is coming back to me. I would like to thank all to our speakers today, that is, and our moderators. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big applause for our speakers and our moderators today. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to the next agenda. I would like to invite Ibu Zuriatun Thaibah as the Dean of the Faculty of Social and Political Science to deliver a small token of appreciation to all speakers today. For Ibu Zuriatun Thaibah, please come to the text. For our speakers, the first token were given to the Professor Bakarr Bah. Thank you for Professor Bakarr Bah. And the seconds, please welcome Pak Iding to give the small token appreciations for Pak Dr. Mohammad Hasan Ansori. And the third is the small token will be given by Ibu Cucu to the Dr. Ella Syaputri Prihatini. Once again, thank you so much for all our speakers, Professor Bakarr Bah, Dr. Mohammad Hasan Ansori, and Dr. Ella Shopri Prihatini. We have a photo session in the last sections. So, ladies and gentlemen, we hope that this seminar can open our knowledge and discussions on conflict and peace building in local and global contexts. And yeah, thank you once again for joining us at this seminar. I hope you find this experience both intellectually stimulating and personally rewarding. Now let us end this seminar by saying Hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Fredi Zinta as the Master of Ceremonies today. Would like to apologize to all my mistakes while presenting this ceremony. Thank you so much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, this is the last sections. We will take a photo together with our speakers. For the all speakers can come forward in here to take the photo together. Please.